Okay, so professional discussion 6 on my reflection of how effective communication was during chairing of a meeting. The meeting in question involved stakeholders from operations, business managers times 3, operations manager times 1, a skills trainer, a skills academy manager, 2 recruitment managers, and a sector account manager. The importance of the venue in this instance was Peterborough is the home office for 90% of those stakeholders, and the one which isn't the home office is within suitable commuting distance. It's ultimately the viability of the meeting and the input, the length, etc., is all guaranteed most by how comfortable and how effortless it should be to attend that meeting. In terms of the actual location of the meeting, booked a training room big enough to support the lion's share of 9-10 people attend that meeting on that day well in advance, and reconfigured the room into a boardroom style setup to ensure that all parties could see all parties face to face, eye contact, etc. As again, our training spaces are primarily set up into like horseshoes and other sort of shapes which are great for classroom style learning, but for a meeting where input from various parts of the business was required, I believe that having a suitable layout which meant everyone could converse and understand each other was important. In respect of how engaged the audience was, because it was explicitly aimed at supporting operations but involving stakeholders that had a primary relationship with us and a vested interest in our success, it was generally well received and had good engagement. However, I think part of that comes from sharing an agenda well ahead of time and also gauging whether there was amendments and addendums and added things well in advance that certain stakeholders wanted to address and wanted to see to ensure that all views were considered, and that ultimately the meeting length etc. could be controlled. In respect to outcomes, how they were addressed and how we got to those points in the meeting, everything was tracked. I think in total we had 2 people, including myself, taking notes at the time. And before we exited and closed the meeting, actions were addressed and the attendee who was responsible for picking up that action was confirmed, meaning that at the end of that day we had the ability to instantly recall and say X, Y, or Z was responsible for picking up whichever workflow they were looking into. And again, sharing that digitally so everyone had that in an email by the close of play that day again just meant everyone was aware of what we achieved, what we discussed, what the outcome was, what the subsequent actions were, and who was responsible for picking those up. In respect to the leadership style, I don't think my approach to meeting with peers and stakeholders differs too much from my approach to leading a team in that respect. And my approach to chairing a meeting, again, is very much one where I do seek to gain value from everyone that is there. And especially in this instance where from an attendee point of view, we had 3 individuals from recruitment, 2 individuals from training. It meant there was very different interpretations of what an issue looked like, and operationally, for example, attendance, which was a core part of this 2 courses, was viewed one way by operations because we understand attrition, etc., and start to bake that into whatever we are planning. From a recruitment perspective, their eyes are more on, well, this is how we address attendance to interviews. Could you try X, Y, and Z? And conversely, from a skills academy perspective, it was, could you try that or that? Could we get L&D involved to help with this or that? And I think having a laissez-faire and a overly democratic approach to leading and chairing meetings, it means that everyone is having an active input, and it does tend to promote a meeting where everyone has a chance to express an opinion or a view on something, which in this instance was hyper valuable. The timing of the meeting. So the meeting itself bled over lunchtime, and for spring it was a moderately nice day. So well in advance, we discussed the concept of lunch and drinks to ensure that the timing of the meeting, which was already booked into everyone's calendars in advance, wasn't going to be impacted negatively by lunchtime breaks, etc., toilet breaks, drinks breaks, etc. So all of that was taken into account well in advance to try and insulate as much time for actual active discussion as possible, and to prevent too much redundancy in terms of getting up, going out, and fracturing whatever effectiveness the meeting might have had. In terms of how the meeting was then followed up, as I mentioned a moment ago, so an email was sent with a breakdown of who was picking up those actions, which I will upload alongside this, and that provided a base point for any subsequent conversation, any subsequent informal or formal chat about progress for that. And in fact, how this manifested with core employability, a process that we rolled out as a result of this, as a large result of this meeting, should I say. It was evident how the follow-up emails in the train and how the conversation was centered initially around, we discussed this on the meeting and we thought about that during the meeting. Should we implement this and that? And in this day and age where everything we do digitally is through Microsoft Teams in this business and or Microsoft Outlook as emails, sharing, collaborating, ensuring that all parties are aware, all stakeholders are aware is and was quite a simple process. In terms of the impact the meeting has had on the teams, it has positively influenced attendance. So the Skills Academy manager, the skills trainer, operationally 3 business managers and operations manager all benefit from the output of this and the creation of core employability. The cohorted approach that we now utilize to support the grouping up of our participants to allow them to create social bonds, to interact positively with engagement, to engender a sense of trust, comfortability, etc., means we're now cohorting those same people into sector routeways and job brokering faced activities, again, which positively influences recruitment activity. So the vested interest has led to tangible gains across each business unit that was represented on that day. In terms of improvements and what we can do, and iterations that we can look into for future meetings, the next meeting, which I've booked as a direct follow-up of this with the same invitees, is a little into the future. It's Tuesday the 20th of June from memory, and in that particular instance, we will be discussing, and the agenda that has been shared is to pick up on core employability, revisions, what we think has worked well, what haven't worked well, to create a direct link to ensure that we don't just drop any conversation point from last time, but we do try and iterate, we do try and essentially start, stop and continue any process or workflow we previously implemented as a result of that meeting. So how that can be improved, so technology usage on the day, it was primarily 90% face-to-face, very little technology. We do now have a wealth of data to support the improvements that was made through core employability, to engagement, to attendance, to attending a course and entering a job within 365 days, etc., etc. So primarily, I guess, would be the use of reporting and data in that meeting to substantiate an argument and suggestion. And whilst we were fortunate in this instance that all parties were aware of our shortcomings with attendance to courses and engagement levels, etc., the use of data now almost certainly would support that and improve whatever we do or don't do. Beyond that, I do think it's been a successful use of a meeting and sharing a meeting to real tangible gains to the business. Beyond that, I will continue to track any and do typically track any meeting I am part of, and if I chair, I do typically tend to track who, what, why, when, and the actions coming out of it, and I anticipate whatever we have learned collectively as a shared group of stakeholders from the previous meeting, in the future, again, we will be able to reflect on those moments and fully ensure that we've learned and put into place any actions where we could. And overall, pretty happy with how it went.